Well, we're at the magical witching hour, Ben. So why don't I hand over the reins to you, and you can please take charge of the situation and show us what you're going to show us with wit, humor, and intelligence.
I know. Well, I might achieve one of those. It's whether people are laughing at me or with me, and we shall see. So it's great to see everybody. I've always been enjoying some of the catch-ups from these sessions, and so that is the wrong slide. So what I want to do is to talk you through a little bit of the experience that we've had. I'm really not having good luck with the presentation today. Right, now you should be able to see it.
Yes, we
So
do.
I was going to talk you a little bit through our experience and some of the big questions we've been asking ourselves and the lessons that we've learned from creating an environment group within our parish council, and then essentially setting up the grandly titled Long Sutton Nature Reserve, which is a 6-acre site in the heart of our community that has been running for a full 6 months. So it is very early days. But I think that's why you wanted me to talk, Graham, is just to share how we got going. Because it's all well and good going to talk to people who run a 20-year-old nature reserve. Awesome. But what I'm guessing a lot of people are interested in is where do we get going? So I'm going to take you through the journey of the last 3 years instead of building up to this point and try and share with you where it went very wrong and where it went very right. And if there are lots of questions at the end or as we go, that would be awesome. A little bit about me. So I'm fortunate enough to have lived all over the country in Manchester, Huddersfield, Chesterfield, Retford, London. And these days I find myself in Somerset down here in the southwest. And I have a science and computing background, although I had a stint as a tour guide in New Zealand. And I've had the good fortune to work in sustainability for large corporates for the last 25 years. So this will probably feel a bit of a corporate presentation. Unfortunately, that is kind of what I do. But everything I've been doing has been trying to find the business case for running big businesses in a more responsible way. So that includes working with a lot of high street names you might know, as well as a number of other groups that you don't. I've been volunteering for a long time as well. So I've had 10 years as a school governor up in Nottinghamshire. And then since moving down to Somerset and joining my second parish council, I'm now clocking in about 13 or 14 years as a parish councillor, doing a stint as chair, as the broadband and communications officer, and building a neighbourhood plan in my previous community. But I have only been down in Somerset for a few years, so I'm just getting a feel for how things work. The parish that I serve in now is the Long Sutton parish down here, so between Taunton, Bridgewater, and Yeovil. And it's probably like a lot of you for looking at some of the areas. It's a small community of hundreds of homes, not thousands of homes, split into 3 villages. It's generally an elderly population. It's rural. It's reasonably affluent, although we do run the gamut from social housing all the way up to millionaires' mansions. And we're fortunate to have a pub, a shop, and a school and a church. But our precept is only 40 to 50,000 a year. So everything we've been doing around the environment group has been learning to do as much as we can with a relatively small population of potential volunteers and a relatively modest budget. I don't think we spent more than £1,000 or £2,000 a year on the environment group. And actually, one of the goals of the environment group has been to bring more money in from grants and funding elsewhere than it actually costs the council, because then it's a significant net positive to the community. Really, the heart of what we're doing here is almost as soon as I joined the parish council just under 3 years ago, I got invited to take part in the environment group, which is a group of parish councillors who were passionate about the environment and were maybe looking to change the mind of some of the more traditional councillors who didn't necessarily think that there was a problem and didn't necessarily think there was a high demand for this kind of thing in our parish. I think there was generally a feel of it's all fine, or people don't want to get involved with this stuff. Our job is to maintain the hedgerows and to maintain the drains. I am exaggerating for emphasis, but there was certainly a skepticism of the huge amount of interest that we've discovered in the parish. So this environment group ended up being about 6 to 8 people, fluctuating in size, between some parish councillors and then other members of the community who wanted to get involved. And as I say, I'm going to go through a few important questions we asked ourselves. And the first important question that I always want to ask when I'm working on this kind of agenda is why? Why do we want to get involved in an environment group? Why do we want to volunteer? Why do we want to be a parish councillor? And it's a really personal thing. For me, so much of this is about legacy. I want to leave behind something that has made a positive difference, not necessarily at the end of my life, but at the end of my tenure as a parish councillor, or maybe even just at the end of the year. We all give an awful lot of time to our volunteering and our parish council work. And it's really nice to look back at the end of the year and say, actually, we have left something in the community that we can be proud of, and it's nice to be acknowledged for that. Other people are motivated on sustainability because they've got kids or grandkids and they want to make sure those kids live as good a life as they did. Other people want to get involved for exercise or for nature benefits. But certainly in that environment group, most people were motivated by the idea of giving something back to nature, as well as kind of being involved in the community. And if you're on this call, you probably all have your own why, but you're bearing in mind that people may be attracted to this group for lots of different reasons is a great place to start. The second important question we ask is what? So what do we actually want to do? What do we want to focus on? Because there are a huge number of things that we found that people wanted to do, whether it's planting wildflowers, planting trees, engaging with farmers is an interesting challenge. Solar panels, recycling, repurposing, repair cafes, growing your own veg, sharing plants. This whole thing kind of got very, very complicated in terms of lots and lots of competing priorities. And we're a small council with a small number of volunteers initially. So we sort of really wanted to make sure we're focused on the things that really would engage with people. And probably the first thing we did, like a lot of people, is we started with a survey. And what I'll say with hindsight is the survey probably didn't tell us anything we didn't already know, in that people care most about nature, climate change, and waste. But what it did was it gave us a license to operate, because it gave us proof that that intuition that we had as a group was correct, that we actually were able to show with data that there is strong interest in this agenda in our councils, and that we're focusing in the right area. It's not something we're going to repeat every year, but it got us started. As I said, we've got a small community, so we got 80 survey responses of 161 people, but that's about 1 in 5 of the village and 1 in 5 of the houses. So it was a decent sample, and better than many surveys that I've seen for things like neighborhood plans, which come in at somewhere between 5 and 10% for those of you who've done neighborhood plans. It's really hard to get a high response rate. And as expected, the folks who responded were generally over 50, kind of meets our demographic in the area, but also showed the kind of people who were engaged in this. And therefore, the things that we're doing, the what, might be better tailored or best tailored to people in their 50s and 60s. What kind of things are they interested in? What are they able to do? And we also were able to show to the more skeptical members of the community and the group that there is a strong desire to do something about this, because people feel concerned about climate and its impact on the environment, and they want to do something about it. We're seeing from a lot of the community concern about the rate of change that was coming from that community. So a lot of people are saying the seasons and weather and countryside and nature are very different from when they were younger. And bear in mind, most respondees are in their 50s and 60s. That means they've seen change over 30, 40, 50 years. So we know they're concerned about it. We know that they see change. We know that they're worried about climate change as well. And we also know that they deeply care and are connected to their community because of a lot of common things. As I said, we wanted to find that there was interest in our area, but we also wanted to lean into stuff that they cared about. And working in sustainability for as long as I have, most people don't actually take action because of a fear of nature dying or because of a fear of climate change. They're motivated to get involved with stuff because of the opportunity to see the positive upside of it. So it's about protecting the countryside and enhancing nature. It's about the connection in their community. Again, for those of you who from more city-based or urban environments, these are slightly different things. People might care about different issues, but green space seems to feature in every sort of city sustainability program I've looked at. The great thing is that we found out of the people who responded, lots and lots of people were already taking actions to protect nature and reducing waste to landfill and fighting climate change. But there's a noticeable difference. Most people are doing those things on nature and reducing waste, but fighting climate change was a bit more of a foreign concept to people. They felt there was less they could do. And I think a lot of the despair around climate change is a loss of empowerment. Same goes with extinction. It seems like most people don't want to get involved because they don't know how. It feels too big and scary. And so when we looked at the detail, again, people are really interested in the recycling, energy usage, saving themselves money, traditional behaviors, but they know less about protecting soil or changing energy supplies. It was very interesting that very few people had thought about switching their energy supply in this area. And what we heard in talking to people during the surveys and in the text responses was they would love help in identifying more things they can do. People are concerned about it, but that means there's a motivation to take action. So if you want to set up a group in this area, if you want the group to be effective, it seems like the best thing to do is find the things the community cares about most and then enable them to get involved doing stuff that helps them feel better because they're making a positive contribution. So it might not be that they're recycling, but it might be they can do things that protect nature and fight climate change. Like they really want to do those two things. And that allowed us to set up a governance framework of our three priorities. You know, we're going to do a bunch of stuff that enables activities, but we're going to focus on carbon and waste and nature. Makes sense. Didn't actually help us at all. I'll come back to that. But we set up all this governance. We had big task lists of things we wanted to do and how often we were going to do them and who we assigned them to. And I think we wrote it and then never looked at it again. Graham was part of the group at this time, actually. And I think Graham will remember writing this and the fact that it didn't work. And I'll come back to that, why it didn't work in a bit. But the process was useful. The output was not used. And I think that's a really key thing I'll come back to. What it did allow us to do, though, is it allowed us to get started. We planted some trees along the cricket pitch. We held some nature days to engage with people. We planted some saplings and distribute them around the area. And we began working with our lensmen on this stuff. But it was fine. It was ticking along. It was a small group of people doing a little bit, getting a little bit of funding from the parish council. And the transformative thing, the thing that made the biggest difference to this came about a year in. And it was this. We decided that we wanted to try and get people engaged in the agenda and help them understand the actions that they can take in this area. So we hired the village hall for half a day, and we created a very simple set of goals. We wanted 50 people from the village to come along, and we want to lead them in practical and fun conversations about what we can do in our area, you know, just things they can start today. And if we can see them planting some trees and seeds, if we can get some grant applications for our local tree planting charity who gives out free trees, and if we can attract a few more volunteers, then we were successful. And we actually ended up with a problem because so many people turned up, we couldn't fit them all in the village hall. We put out seating for 50 and we had more than 100 turn up. And bear in mind the total population of our village is around 500 to 600. We had a huge engagement in this, which I think showed that people are hungry for information on this. And in the room, we had very simple layout. You know, we had about 12 stations where people were greeted when they came in. We had the free tea and coffee from the WI. And then on each table, we had a little activity. There was a guy who brought in some bees so people could learn about how you support pollinators. We were giving out wildflower seeds. We were talking to them about the survey results. Kids were building bug houses. There was one which was testing your knowledge for recycling. If you got the 10 things in the right boxes, then you got a free Lindor chocolate ball. And it was great. It was very easy to organize, actually. You just need to hire the room, have somebody set up the tables, and invite a whole bunch of people along with a very simple briefing. But what it did was it gave us a catalyst for pulling people together and really seeing that there is interest in the area. Little simple things like we set up a little timetable and we assigned owners for actions on the day. And we did that at a couple of meetings. It wasn't any more complicated than that. And it was somehow it all fell into place and people just got to have a conversation about it. And one of the number one things that came out of it was more people putting their hand up and saying, I don't want to be involved in running this thing, but I'd love to turn up at something on a semi-regular basis and just do something good. And probably, I think, again, between this group, the chair of our parish council wasn't necessarily convinced that people were interested in this stuff until he saw the number of people who turned up at this meeting. And it actually inspired him to do an in-person annual parish meeting, where instead of just reading out a statement in the parish council meeting every year for our annual meeting, he wanted to bring everybody to the village hall to tell them about all the great things that we do around our parish. And we've just had the second one of those. And it's incredibly successful because people want to hear 5 or 10 minute segments about what each of the community groups in the village is doing, what we're doing around the new playground, what's happening at the cricket pitch, what's happening at the nature reserve. And so I think what we've found is we've created this snowball effect that by showing people will come out and join us, and that it's quite easy to organize these things, we're finding more and more groups want to engage with the community, and we get more and more volunteers involved for activities. The biggest bit, and probably the scariest bit, and I'll be honest, a little bit sooner than I was planning on doing, was the creation of the grandly titled Long Sutton Nature Reserve. So we've done a few things over the last year. Owl boxes and surveys. We're going to host another Environment Day because they're proving very popular, so a third one makes sense. But the Long Sutton Nature Reserve really feels like an ambitious project. And I think, again, if you're interested in doing this kind of thing, it is a bit scary and it is a bit of a leap of faith. But we've been weirdly and rapidly successful on this because we tested the village through the surveys and we knew there was interest in it. And we had a good enough core group of people who could coordinate things that it's become much easier than I expected. Because I didn't think we should start it, if I'm honest. I didn't think we were ready, but we sort of did reluctantly on my part. And I've been really pleased with how well it's come together. So I think it makes sense to make the leap in it. The owl boxes is a great example of how this works in the environment group, and it's the same principle applies to the nature group, so to the wildlife reserve. There were two people in the environment group who really cared about owls and did an owl survey and created a little WhatsApp group where people were reporting the owl sightings or owl hearings, I guess is the better phrase. And then there was a guy who was known in the village to enjoy woodwork, and here on the left, Neil. And ultimately, sorry, Nigel even, ultimately the group who wanted to do owl boxes were empowered by the wider environment group to just go off and get on with it. I think sometimes there's a tendency with these kinds of groups where it feels like everyone has to be involved with everything. But realistically, what we found was one or two people really cared about it. They organized it between them. The group said, yep, go ahead with that. Here's a little bit of funding. And then they invited people to join them as and when they did suitable activities. So right now, our owl boxes we think might be being used. They only went up at the beginning of the year. And certainly the community have been really engaged in that. Similarly, we are planning another Environment and Nature Day that will kind of engage with folks. And we're going to expand it this year. Instead of hosting it in spring, we're going to host it in September when people's minds start turning to planning for the nature and gardens over the following year, but also where we think people will start thinking about energy usage and climate change because we're coming up to winter. So we're going to split our hall in half this time. Half are going to do the wildlife stuff and half are going to do energy reduction, energy efficiency. So how to insulate your home, solar panels, air source heat pumps. And the idea is just to give people a chance to come and explore it as an option. But the bit you, I'm sure, all really want to know about is by doing all this stuff, how does it enable the creation of the nature reserve? So I said we've got a core group who coordinate everything, and this is our plot of land just here. So down at the bottom of the screen, it's between our main village of Long Sutton, where the post office and the pub and everything else are, and then here the village I actually live in, which is one of our satellite villages called Knoll, and it's about 6 acres. It's accessible down this little walking path here. And it's been owned by the parish council for decades. It's one of 2 bits of land that we own and look after. And the farmer tenant who'd been grazing sheep on it for many years had decided to surrender it. And between a couple of conversations with our chair, they agreed to forego the £500 a year rent that we used to get for that field and instead give it over to the environment group to see if we could create a nature reserve. The only reason I think he was willing to do that was because we'd proved that our group had longevity and we'd been able to bring together the community at the environment days and at the various other projects we'd be doing. So he was convinced that there was enough interest in the community to maybe sustain a project that's slightly larger, and that we could justify giving up the £500 a year in rent because enough of the community would support this. Again, all that work on surveying and all the work to kind of prove our concept gave us much bigger license to operate to sort of show that this is a good use of parish funds or sacrifice of parish funds. But what it puts on us is a sort of duty that the nature reserve can't be this private thing for just a few of us to come and play in. If we can't draw the community down to that nature reserve and show very actively it's being used by a wide section of the community, then the risk is we lose it because we can't justify that we're giving up that rent for it. And what that led to is a lot of discussions in our group between whether we should just fence it all off and let it go wild, or whether it should have walking paths and picnic benches, or whether it should have an orchard and vegetable growing garden, or whether we should have a place you can walk your dogs, because nothing has been as controversial as whether dogs are allowed on the nature reserve or not, or whether even we have a free running zone for dogs, because we recently closed our cricket pitch to dogs, and therefore the residents are running out of places to run their dogs. We know walking dogs would bring people down there, but it's also not so good for wildlife. So what's the balance of how we use this community space for the benefit of nature, but also for the benefit of as many of the community as possible? The other thing that's worth pointing out is up here at the top of the map, you can see this is actually a small holding and another nature conservation area that's being run by a private individual because she believes in nature and she wants to run it as an art space, a community kitchen. And there are a few plots of land around here which are also classified as private community nature reserves under our local wildlife trust. This is interesting though at the top, because arguably if she's setting up this space as a community kitchen, community art space, it's a competitor for the potential use of the community land, because they're quite close to each other. And we might find that someone wanting to do a willow weaving class or an outdoor painting class has to choose between those two spaces, which means that either space is going to be utilized a lot less than it would have been if they were the only space in the area. So what we need to do is to work really closely to make sure that these two areas serve different purposes, that they don't compete with each other. We also got really strong feedback from the community at our nature days. There is no interest in growing a community orchard here, and there's no interest in allotments here. A lot of these community spaces would be dedicated towards some element of food growing. But actually, if you look at our area, most people have a fairly substantial back garden. There are orchards all over the place, and we have far more apples in our community than we know what to do with. So again, the nature reserve lent more into a space for nature than it was a space for food production and growing crafts. That, on the flip side, slightly agitates some of the farmers or the more traditional groups of the community, because they see that we're taking land out of production and into just a nature space. So there was this interesting debate around what our role is in ensuring that the country can feed itself now and in the future. A little bit of closer with the nature reserve, we started sketching out what it looks like. So down the left here is the somewhat of a road. It's certainly a bad track that you can just about drive vehicles down. There is a gate at the top that was completely overgrown, and another gate here on this road. So it lends itself very well for little walkthroughs. So this green is paths. The idea is to plant up a quieter, wilder area in the top corner and a hazel meadow down here, with ponds going in at strategic low points. And then in between tree copses, more hedging going in, made from native species, and then some wildflower test beds, which will eventually be expanded. So the idea here is we're trying to create a diversity of habitats and a diversity of uses that don't compete with similar things nearby. So walking paths to draw people through. Every time I'm down there, I see people walking through with dogs on leads. Wildflowers because obviously it's great for pollinators, ponds because it's usually the base of the ecosystem, and then a growing area with plants that can be used for future country crafts, but also are great for wildlife as well. So it's a real mix and it's evolving. Every time we go up there, there's more ideas. And already we're starting to see, the local school has come and built some bug houses here as part of one of their nature days. We're starting to see trees being donated that are fruit trees or trees from people's gardens. And so they're starting to fill in new patches as well. The best day of my entire year so far was this. So we were able to get gifted 800 trees and hedging plants across about 20 different species. And we invited people down to come and plant those trees, expecting about 20 people to turn up. And we had more than 60. Some from the local community, some from the local charity that gave out the trees, and some folks from far away just because they'd heard we were doing tree planting and people want to plant trees. And there's a sort of some of the lessons we took from this is there is no shortage of trees if you want to plant them. There are so many groups giving out free trees. You almost get a bit fed up of being offered trees. It's one of the things you can get most easily. We gave out 100 at a previous community event, and frankly, not everybody wanted them because they didn't have space, but we ended up giving them to a local farmer who planted them. And I think our community in total, bearing in mind, is a very small community. We've taken 3,000 to 4,000 trees from charities in just the last couple of years, and they've gone into various private paddocks and land. But this was the first time we've really done it at scale on public land. The hedges were, this is a hedgerows, they were planted 3 deep, 50 centimeters apart. And you can see that we decided to try and create a more natural curve, because what it'll do is it will create a great windbreak, but it will create natural and different habitats in the leaves of the hedgerows rather than being straight. And it's just a fun thing to walk through. It's sort of a double thickness path. We took local pizza boxes from one of the local Airbnbs. There was an awful lot of them. And we got free bark mulch from a very good website that arranges free bark chips. It just happened to be delivered. It took us about 4 hours for 60 people to plant 800 trees. But what we found was it took longer than it should have done because you get a lot of people at the start and then they dwindle out after a couple of hours. So it was a bit of a stretch. And I think if I was to do it again, I would plan on each person planting 10 to 20 trees rather than the stretch we had. But it was great, really, really good. Clearly, people will turn out for cake and tree planting, and it didn't cost us a penny. Similarly, a team member cleared out the overgrown hedge and we found an old gate, and our local council depot donated a free metal gate to allow pedestrians because they wanted something that was wheelchair accessible. I mean, arguably that ground's not great for wheelchairs, but they had that, and they have loads of these usually sat around in the yard. And the thing that costs the council a lot of money is paying a contractor to come out and install them. And we're fortunate in that we have a couple of volunteers who are footpath wardens. So they turned out and put a gate in here on the left, the overgrown one. And then they also fitted a new one on the right as well. So people can walk through this field. As I say, the community turned out and donated a bunch of stuff when the school was going to build bug hotels, and getting the school down there is obviously great for the kids. Teachers love it because it's just down the road from the school, but it's another way of demonstrating that we're bringing the community into the area, and then it makes the parents curious about coming and visiting what the school kids have done. So again, it's helping people get down to this nature reserve. And then we've got donated from one of the Bumblebee Conservation Trusts, a group of wildflower mixers. So we hired a turf stripper using some of the parish council funds, stripped some turf, and we've sown wildflower seeds to see which mix takes best. Unfortunately, we sowed it before that really big drought we had earlier in the year, so they didn't do brilliantly, and we should have got the water supply to the nature reserve sorted sooner. And as you can see from the photo on the left, which was taken a few weeks after this one on the right, we didn't really have a problem with wildflowers in the end. It turned out they just naturally were enjoying appearing. In terms of what's coming up, the idea is we've, in fact, on Monday just installed 4 really large picnic benches, and they weren't very expensive, and we think a local business will sponsor those. And that's the idea, is to allow the kids to come down and have outdoor lessons on the benches. We're going to try and use some council funds or a grant from the council, from FWAG probably, who are the local alliance for nature conservation on farms, to come along with a digger and put some ponds in the fields. And we think there used to be one and it's filled in, so we can fix that. We've been given even more trees by a Trees for Schools campaign, and that school's going to come down and plant those. And we definitely want to kind of engage with more people on this through the next Environment Day, which we're going to experiment on in September. Last couple of slides, and then we can go to Q&A. I guess you want to know how we did it. Well, hopefully I've sort of dropped some hints on that. But it really is a small group of people coordinating it, and then each of them breaking off and doing the thing they're passionate about, rather than making somebody do something they don't want to do. It was really about saying, okay, we're going to enable you to do the thing you care about, whether that's owl boxes, whether it's wildlife friendly seed planting, whether it's surveys, whether it's about fixing gates. Each one of those projects I showed you was actually led by a different member of the group, and they just shout for help if they need it. And it seems to work really well. If I was to bake the cake again, in terms of my recipe, it does need that enthusiastic volunteers. They definitely, Graham, will agree with me, they are a characterful bunch, but it's quite a diverse group as well, and therefore it's great because people get involved in different things. Getting a manageable patch of land is useful. The fact that we had some land was very, very helpful. 6 acres has proven a bit much. I think we're currently focusing on 3 acres. The other 3 acres we'll just get a farmer in to take the grass later in the year, but we'll be able to move into it eventually. If you can't get land, I know this is one of the biggest challenging things, is land's expensive. It's about £10,000 to £12,000 an acre in most communities. I've met similar groups doing similar things who've taken on the management of land that's owned by the water authority. Sometimes private land can be ceded over, although I'd definitely say you'd want a long-term contract for that. And it is possible to try and crowdfund or raise money to buy it, because if you're in a parish council that has a decent set of reserves, or if you want to boost your precept for the year, it's not too difficult in most places to find 10 or 20 grand if a patch of land comes up. We've even found people who are eager to donate the land. So our local friendly society has several acres of their own, and they don't want to manage it anymore. They want to hand it over for something that's community good. And we're having serious conversations with them about how we also manage that land for nature. Right now it's a little bit too much work, but we're looking for options. A big thing for us was getting people together, both as a community, but also as a kind of coordinating group, to decide what we want the land to be. So it was very interesting that it was very clear nobody wanted it for food production. Nobody wanted it as a tree nursery or a wildflower seed nursery, which would have been amazing, but it's a lot of work to do that, and you'd need a larger group of volunteers. We didn't want it as a sports ground, and right now we don't want it as a place to walk your dogs off leash, but possibly we're sort of allowing them to walk them on leash because it was just driving a lot of footfall through there. Outdoor classroom was key. And then going beyond that, we also were advised to set up a little charter where we talk about the things that might lead to us falling out in the future. So in particular, what counts as a weed? Are power tools involved? Are we allowed to use weed killer? All those little things where different philosophies of nature might cause us a bit of a problem. And that's certainly, we found that's where temperatures could flare. Thankfully, we never really had that. But imagine that someone comes on and says, well, let's spray it with weeds to get a weed killer to get rid of dock leaves. Or I'll bring along my Bunsen burner flamethrower thing to burn the weeds off. What does that look like? Similarly, what do we do with the grass if we have to cut the grass? Do we leave it to rot or do we take it away? So all these things, by sorting them out early on in the process, we kind of got everybody on side. And we also knew that going into this, we're only 6 months in, and we've been very lucky we've been able to achieve a fair amount in that time. But if we hadn't done anything by now, 6 months in, I think the chair and members of the community might be asking us, why are we not doing anything with this land, given it's cost the parish council £250 so far this year in lost rent? So you need a few early win projects, and getting that group of people together to plant the trees. Again, I think that, lots of people were taken aback by how many people turned up for that and how much fun it was. And it was a great half day. really, really good. The other thing is, and I'd say that certainly where our group has had challenges, is one person feeling like they're taking on all of the work. And that created resentment both in the person who felt like they were taking on all the work and in lots of other people in the group who maybe felt they were doing some things, and it was they would like more recognition for that. And I think both parts of that debate had merit. And I think sometimes um, taking on too much at once can scare people off. And therefore, we try to keep it very, very simple. What are the 2 or 3 things we're going to do in the next 6 months? And who wants to take on those? And it's okay if you're not feeling like you can manage anything right now, because sometimes life gets in the way. The kids are sick, the parents are sick, the business needs some more focus. So being really careful not to rush into it and making sure there's enough people and that you're kind of setting your ambition to meet the time and availability of everybody. Because I think the group have done an amazing job of running the nature reserve. But I sort of wish we hadn't had little fallouts over the workload falling on different people. Um, Slice it up and share it around. I've pretty much talked about. And don't worry if it's not perfect. We none of us mind soggy bottom bread sometimes, but there are things about the nature reserve that are not brilliant right now. We lost a number of the saplings that we planted during the drought, but it would have put too much pressure on the people to rush around it every night and water them with hand carried watering cans. We just had to accept that we were going to lose some. And ultimately, I think that saved a lot of people's sanity. The final question, because I know I'm probably getting near to the end here, is how do we do better? So reflecting on everything we've learned on this and reflecting on that recipe, what are the key things that would maybe change? And it's really these 6 things. The governance and plans that I showed you, people have very little interest in that. There might be 1 or 2 individuals who don't mind it, still get on with it. But most people will get involved because they want to do something. They want to plant a tree. They want to do those actual things that make a difference. That has unfortunately meant that I find myself doing a lot of the admin. So there usually has to be somebody who takes that on. And when I created the charter that wrote up the discussions we'd had around what we can and can't do on the land, I haven't had a single person feedback on that in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I think just bear in mind that the motivation to get involved with this stuff is not usually for the bureaucracy, and therefore minimizing the bureaucracy is a big thing. Most people will get involved with writing a grant application once in a while because it'll help deliver the project they care about. Despite the fact that they don't really like the paperwork and the governance, the process that we went through to discuss what is and isn't allowed on the nature reserve, what it's for and what it's not, it created a real consensus in the group, which meant that when people were spinning off and doing actions, it was much easier to say, yeah, of course the school can come in and do a nature reserve, a bug house. Of course the school can get involved with building some benches and do outdoor classrooms. I think that helped so much. And I think now the group's seen the practicality of the use of it. I think people are not happier with the debate we had around dogs. So no dogs off leash, but dogs on leash following the paths is okay. And I think it's just made our lives so much easier. For those of you who read Animal Farm, you'll remember the quote that everybody is equal, but some are more equal than others. It's a slight tongue-in-cheek reference, but we are running the group democratically. But by the nature of the fact some people are more involved and more proactive, what they want to do tends to get done because they're the ones making it happen. And there is a chair role, there always is, even though we didn't want to have one. And that chair role tends to guide and shape things. So again, we're sort of dividing the responsibilities that some do grants, and some do tree planting, some do governance. But I think you should bear in mind that no group will be 100% equal. There will always be 2 or 3 people who tend to guide and shape it. And that's okay, but making sure everyone's voices are recognized is key. Watch out for martyrs. Again, slight tongue in cheek, but there are certainly folks out there who are purists or who want to throw themselves into saving the world. And what I found was that tends to lead to burnout. The folks who really, really want to get it done as fast as possible, then are the folks who feel like they're overwhelmed and can't get it all done. So finding the balance between slow and steady wins the race and harnessing the energy and the enthusiasm quickly enough where it doesn't fizzle out before we get stuff done has been really key. And what I've found is it's sort of ebbed and flowed throughout the year based on what people are doing. I'd also say that doing this, apart from having to buy land, which if you have to buy land, that's difficult, um, there's just money around. Like it's been really easy to get a couple of £1,000s out of the parish council. So that's 1 or 2% of our budgets. And if you're a bigger council, I mean, a couple of grand is not a lot of money. But there's also people want to sponsor this. I've had people turn up at my house and give me a whole pallet full of trees because they've dug them out of their garden or they've found ones the squirrels have planted. Wildflower seeds are a little bit trickier. Wildflower plugs seems to be impossible to get without paying for them. But for the basic stuff, it hasn't been a problem. We haven't yet bought any machinery because there seems to be people all over the place who will lend us it. And occasionally we've had to hire it, but that's £50. But the tricky stuff is, as I alluded to earlier, if you haven't got a bit of land, getting that bit of land is the tricky piece. But again, we found that churches, churchyards, the Friendly Society, an elderly person who maybe wants to leave a legacy for the village, a farmer who might find there's a corner of their land that's unproductive, the local water authority. There are often opportunities that emerge, but doing that consultation I talked about at the beginning seems to be the only way to find out about it. Getting out there and talking to people. If we hadn't done our environment day, we wouldn't have learned that the Friendly Society had a bit of land that they were looking to have someone use. And I say that quick win, showing people that people want to turn up for this stuff has really won over more and more people in the community because a good, successful group attracts more people. I found that when I was a school governor, a school that's doing really well in the Ofsted inspections attracts governors. A school that's struggling in Ofsted, it's more difficult to attract volunteers. And I think it's just the same on a nature reserve, that if we make sure we're communicating every month, look how cool this is, come and see the flowers, we've just built some benches, that gets so many more people getting involved. And just last week, we had a lady who lives in the village, runs a forest school in the neighboring village. She volunteered to get involved, which is exactly what we want. I sort of wonder why she hasn't been involved before now, but obviously I think because it's now a reality, people see it as a real thing because of the comms we've done. They're now like eager to get involved because everybody wants to be on the winning team. I'm going to stop because, as you can hear, my voice is starting to fail me. I hope everybody is still with me. You're all still on camera, actually, which I'm always impressed at for this. So, Graham, I have no idea if that's what you wanted. Everyone's been very quiet, and I now see there's a chat that I missed. We're recording. Okay, that's good. So I have 10 minutes of your time for you to grill me, challenge me, or ask me if the recipe tastes good. So it's
Well, Ben, let me start by saying that I think you smashed it. I think you lived up to all the hype that we gave you, and well done. I will take action against you separately for mentioning earlier on that I was part of this group, and then you put up a slide saying the group is full of nuts. I would quite sure where that's based on, but never mind. Well done. I think it was really fun, and let's now move to the questions. So, Stuart.
I'd just like to thank Ben. That was excellent presentation, and I'm really impressed with the community engagement that you managed to generate. I find speaking to many sort of climate and environment groups that is one of their major problems, and it's certainly a problem I've experienced. And I was very interested that your group fairly rapidly split into an environment group and a climate and energy sort of group. And again, I found exactly the same thing happening with our Stansted group. And the environment group turned out to be a lot bigger and a lot more enthusiastic than the energy group. And I think people can see the environment, that they can't see CO2 and energy and this, that, and the other, and it doesn't appear on their day-to-day radar. So I think that was great. A couple of things about your nature reserve. I didn't notice any composting area. And
Yeah,
I think a composting area would be a great addition. And I think it's a great sort of teaching thing for children, just to have a look at compost, what's in it, and value it. And the other bit I'm not sure was present was any wildlife corridors connecting your nature reserve to other sort of nature bits in the parish.
that's a really, really good questions. So yeah, you're absolutely right about the split. Although there's quite a lot of crossover, but we found the community interest was very split. And I think if any of you have ever kind of done development work or been involved with charities in Africa, clean water gets 10 times the funding that clean sanitation does, because water and kids drinking clean water is a lot more public facing, a lot more engaging than toilets are. Yet toilets are the biggest source of deaths. So I think it's the same for us, as you say, nature and planting a tree feels like an instant gratification for a lot of people, whereas insulating your loft or putting solar panels on the roof, not only is it more expensive and more challenging, but it weirdly doesn't feel as rewarding in the short term. Composting, brilliant idea. Yeah, I mean, we haven't actually taken anything from the land yet or cut anything yet, but at the end of the year we will. We are going to take all the grass off and take it away, but we could compost some in the corner because we want to reduce the nutrient levels on the land for the wildflowers to be able to get in.
Yeah.
But I like that idea of a compost zone for school kids. So I think if we get a few pallets in the corner, I think it's a really good idea.
And leaf mold.
Yeah.
I've actually got 3 acres here, and I've got more leaf mold than I know what to do with.
Well, send some our way, and I'm not too far from Essex, because yeah, it's obviously amazing for make a seed compost. Your second question actually kind of links to what Louise has asked. So we are on a number. So for those of you who haven't seen it in the chat, Louise has said, "Did you take advice on the nature reserve from the Wildlife Trust?" Absolutely. So we've had 4 surveys of land by various groups. Our local Wildlife Trust, Reimagining the Levels, who provide the seeds, and they look for where you can put trees and the kinds of trees that will do well. The Bumblebee Conservation Trust, because we're on a wildlife corridor for a very rare bee called the carder bee, the red carder bee, I think it is. And between, I think it might be Curry Rival, actually. I think they have them. And then somewhere off on the other side of us has them. And we've, as a community, been very consciously planting bee mixes that are appealing to this bee to create corridors for it. So they've done that. And then one of my favorite charities is a charity based in Yeovil called Able to Achieve, which takes young people with learning challenges and various different developmental challenges and trains them to scythe, to wheelbarrow, to do nature counts. And they've been out and done a survey on our land as well. Each group's kind of looked for different things, but they've been really good to sort of get involved. And our local Wildlife Trust runs the PCNR, the Private Community Nature Reserves group, which is about 100 nature reserves in our community that are either owned by individuals or run by community groups, but are not official nature reserves. So we all kind of link with each other to figure out how we do that. I think one challenge for our land is it's in the middle of fields and next to a golf course, but the other is it is a sort of stepping stone between 2 or 3 of those. And I think I showed you that the little reserve at the top of the map, which is that the individual's private one, and then there are a few on the way as well. So yeah, I think there's tons of opportunity for things like compost bins and corridors. We just need to get some trees growing, I think. So thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Moving on to Gary, please.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Just want to say, first of all, that we do wildflower plug planting here in Corsham. We've done that for the last couple of years, where I've got volunteers to grow them at home and then bring them out when they're ready and plant them. To be honest with you, it's a lot of effort. It's always been quite a lot of effort, and people kind of have brought along plants that haven't been ready to go out and that kind of thing. And this year it's been a bit of a struggle because the weather's been so dry. So managing that as well. So I just say that, but it's a good opportunity for people who aren't quite so active and able to get out and kind of plant trees and stuff, but they can grow some wildflowers at home and then bring them and let other people can plant them out and stuff. So that's an option. I just want to ask you, what are you doing about watering at the moment? Because we're now looking like another big dry, hot period is going to hit. Have you got plans in place to deal with the watering situation?
We do, yeah. So you saw we were mulching with the cardboard and the wood chips. Unfortunately, we ran out of both. So we got about 70, 80% of everything mulched. And also that'll help keep water in the soil once it's there. We have found there is a farmer's pipe, a blue pipe in the hedgerow that we've known about for a while. And we've had permission from the farmer now to connect that pipe into this field that we're in and either feed a trough that we can manually fill up or feed a large hose or a those IBCs, the big clear bulk containers that we could put on there and fill up. He did say he wanted it metering, but he's sort of now turned around and said, no, it doesn't matter. I'll just give you the water. It's fine, because water's not that expensive if you don't use too much of it. Obviously, you need to conserve it. But funny enough, the advice from the people who gave us the trees, who plant trees all over the county, reimagining the levels they're called, they said, well, just put them in the ground and they'll fend for themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, you'll lose some, but we'll replace them if they die. And you just kind of have to accept it because the amount of watering you'd have to do to keep them alive is more effort than replanting a few. I actually did my own 800 plants a couple of years ago, and we did water them twice during the drought, and it has made a phenomenal difference to the survival rate. And I do know we've lost about 50 so far on the land, mainly of the hazels. I don't know why. So we are mulling over getting up there and just giving them a rescue water sometime in the next week or two from this hose. But it goes to what I was saying about we'll only do it if there's people willing to do it and to put their hand up. I'm not going to force this on anybody. I'm not going to guilt trip on anybody. And if we lose the trees, we lose the trees. But it was amazing how well most of them did survive in that last drought. So it's a difficult balance, but I'd rather lose the trees than lose the volunteers.
And like you say, you can always get more trees.
There is no shortage.
I know, we're the same here. It's like, we're constantly getting messages saying, yeah, do you want some trees? Do you want some trees?
Yeah. We know we've got another 100 coming in October, which will be great because 100 is manageable. I think 800 was a bit ambitious today. But thanks, Gary.
Move on to Matthew, please.
Hi, yes. I've written a list of questions. I think other people have already asked them. So Sean's one. Yeah, combining biodiversity and sustainability. We're trying to set up a similar group here, which I'm calling the Biodiversity and Sustainability Working Group. And you're right, nearly everybody on the team wants to get involved with biodiversity, not necessarily sustainability, but great idea to involve the sustainability in days when you involve the public. And we've done that. We had a couple of years ago particularly on heating and energy stuff. And you can get some really good advice from, there's several organizations who will come along and give that advice. And that's kind of the way to do. I don't think a local group like this can do much. We looked at community energy schemes and that kind of stuff, and it's all just too much. So that's that. Talks on the Nature Day. How did you find that works? Because I kind of feel that kind of stopping the thing of people coming along to stalls around the edge and having somebody standing up and giving the talk could be an issue. I noticed that Stokes and Gregory have a very good Environment Day, and they have that happening in a separate room, which kind of works quite well. What was your experience there?
Exactly as you said, actually, Matthew, that the first year we did it, we had the stalls, and then everyone got an hour to wander around, and then we sort of had to get everybody to go and sit down, and we gave a talk. And then we repeated it in the afternoon, but the number of attendees in the afternoon was very low. And it was quite hard to get them all to settle down. In the second year, we only did the morning talk because the afternoon talk, it didn't seem to make sense. And exactly to say, like, people were so into the conversations, you ended up struggling to hear because not everybody came and joined the presentation. If we had a separate room, we'd have used it, but we don't have that kind of space in our hall. This year, I'm mulling over doing talks again. But what I find is it's the enthusiasm to connect with neighbors, to meet with people. And the stuff that was really powerful was we did have a few people, I think like Centre for Sustainable Energy and Somerset Council came along on energy in the first year. And that was good. but they were more interested in learning what their neighbors and their peers were doing. So, oh, I put solar panels on my roof. Oh, how did you find them? Oh, I've got an air source heat pump. So I think there's something about, if your neighbor does it, you trust it more, and then you go and find a supplier. So I think talks had a place, and on both years it was me and the Nature Trust, sorry, the Wildlife Trust, but I didn't bring anybody else on, and I don't think we do lots of them again, because I think it is that interaction on tables that made the difference. We are thinking about leading a walking tour around the nature reserve this year. It might be weather dependent though, because it will be October.
Yeah, that's great. That's kind of what I thought. I'm going to contact you directly because there's a whole bunch of things where we can kind of work together. Things
Would love to
groups
do
I
that.
work with can help you. And yeah, so I'll contact you directly on a bunch of stuff like that.
Thank you. That's great.
David, can we move to you, please?
Oh yeah, good afternoon. This is just a thought out of slightly out of the left. We're doing some work on how to use, how to integrate biodiversity and ground-mounted solar systems, and particularly agrivoltaics. So you might want to think about potentially, if you're not making maximum use of the ground, another ground, about putting low area ground-mounted systems, because they've changed the regulations on actually installing small, less than 5 megawatt units, and you could actually develop a system that allows you to move towards net zero, maximize the use, still retain biodiversity, and use that part of a much wider net zero mix.
An interesting idea, actually. I wouldn't immediately go with the nature reserve because of the location, but there are a couple of other community-owned fields where we could do that. And agrivoltaics is very cool. So if you look into that, that's quite advanced, David, because it is very cutting edge to sort of see how you combine those things.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't heard of agrivoltaics, it's essentially solar panels with crops growing under them, and you benefit from the shade. So it's I am going to have to head off in a short while, so I don't know, Graham, have we got any other questions? I can't see the
One from
list.
Joe.
Go on then, Joe.
Yeah.
Just a really quick question. Your survey, was it online or was it hand delivered to every house?
We in the past I've done both. This one was online, and we got it in the newsletters, which were hand dropped to all the houses. I'm trying to think. We did have a paper version, actually. I think it was by collection. So if you want a paper version, come and collect one from the village hall, kind of thing. So it isn't the most inclusive method, but again, it was a balance of what was feasible at the time. We also, I think we promoted it at Nature Day as well. Again, slightly biased audience in that case.
Okay.
We did have some climate deniers come out of the woodwork. That was interesting. But it's the more you can do on this engagement stuff, to the points made earlier, the better. And I think we have a good Facebook group, we have a good paper newsletter, and we have a good digital newsletter now as well. But we're never going to get to everybody, and I think
No. I just wonder, because we have an argument in our village between online and putting it through people's doors. And the other really quick question was, before you did the survey and things, you said it was a couple of councillors and stuff that wanted to set up the group. How did you get, I take it that you, before you did anything and you had your couple of councillors, did you also then involve your neighbours, the public, before you sort of set up the survey? Were they involved before the survey, or?
The way it manifested was 2 or 3 of us on the council were talking about how we really want to do something to help make the villages more sustainable. And we happened to be chatting with other neighbours about that. And they said, oh yeah, that sounds really good. I'd like to be involved, but I don't want to be a councillor. So, shout me if you need me. And the survey we just developed by getting together for 30 minutes over a cup of tea, chatting about the stuff we want to know. And then somebody kind of put the hand up and said, okay, I'll go and draft it. They shared it around, it got edited, and then it went on to SurveyMonkey. Again, we're trying to keep things very low key, if I'm honest, because you can make a whole affair out of just governance and data collection and editing, and it drives people off, I've found. it's not like when we do a neighborhood plan and you have to be really thorough and you have to get to everybody and prove that. This is more, we want to do some cool stuff. We want to be enabled and know that we're doing stuff that the village isn't going to be against, and we want to prove to others the village is supportive of this to justify then asking for some budget. So it was, as I say, sometimes you do a survey to say you've done a survey. I know that's really cheeky, but you kind of know where the focus is, but you feel better by having made sure that people are on board. And again, it flushes people out with the woodwork. They feel instant interest in it.
That's really, really interesting. Thanks very much.
No problem. If you want a copy of the survey, Joe, just ping me a note and we can, I think we've still got the questions somewhere as well.
Great. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay.
Ben, thank you so much for that. It was a great pleasure, and I'm not seeing anyone else asking questions, so I'm going to call this a day. But it was a great treat to listen to you, and I think it filled exactly the ground that we were looking to do, is how the hell do you get started? So I think you demonstrated that very well. Thank you, and well done. And
Pleasure to meet you.
thank you all very much, and we'll
Hey,
see
thank
everybody
you.
else next week. And as always, I've completely forgotten what's coming next week, so I'll let you know later. Take care. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.